Personality disorders is probably my most enjoyable topic and subject. So I try to do this as easy as possible. And the way I teach my supervisees the personality disorders is by breaking them up in clusters. So you'll hear me say cluster A, cluster B, cluster C. I think it makes it a lot easier when you're trying to learn the material, you're trying to retain it. You can remember certain diagnoses in each category. Without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and move on to this presentation. And if anything is confusing or doesn't make sense, please put it in the comment section. I'd be more than happy to redo the video and make it easier for you to understand, or just provide a little information in the comment section. So what are personality disorders? That's the big question. And you need to know this as a mental health professional. Personality disorders are a group of mental health conditions that involve persistent patterns of thought, feelings, and behavior. So the way these individuals think, feel, and behave are pretty persistent. And they normally deviate from social norms and can cause significant distress in their everyday life. So this is just not someone that, oh, that's just their personality. It can be that. However, these are behaviors and, like I shared, feelings and thoughts that are pretty significant. And we're going to break this up in clusters. So I'm going to talk about cluster A first. Cluster A personality disorders are categorized by odd, eccentric, and suspicious behaviors. So individuals in this category are odd, eccentric, or suspicious. So whenever you're doing a scenario on a test, or you're listening to a case study or reading a case study, look out for those behaviors that might be odd, eccentric, or just really different, or suspicious. These personality disorders in cluster A are schizoid, schizotypal, and paranoid. So those are the three in cluster A. And we'll go in more depth, and I'm going to give you some examples throughout. So just hold on. Cluster B personality disorders. These are categorized by dramatic, emotional, or erratic behaviors. So individuals in this category will appear to be very dramatic, really emotional, and some of their behaviors are erratic. So if you think about these specific diagnoses, such as antisocial, borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic personality disorders, they pretty much demonstrate some of this drama, emotionality, or erratic behaviors. And cluster C. Cluster C personality disorders are categorized by anxious, fearful, or avoidant behaviors. These personalities are avoidant, dependent, and obsessive compulsive personality disorders. These are the disorders that fall in that cluster C. So you definitely want to pay attention and kind of make sure, if you're reading a case study or, again, working with a client, that you pick up on some of these behaviors that might be anxious or might be fearful or maybe avoidant. So if you understand the classification of personality disorders in these various clusters, cluster A, cluster B, and C, it can help you recognize the unique characteristics and patterns associated with each group. So that is why I personally teach my supervisees to do cluster A, B, and C when they're learning the personality disorders. All right, let's go on to cluster A. I must say, when I was trying to take the exam, I really got kind of stuck in this cluster and confused with a few of these. Paranoid was simple for me, but schizoid and schizotypal, I just could not understand the difference. So hopefully I'm able to explain it to you so you can learn the difference. Well, personality disorder number one under cluster A is paranoid. These individuals have a pervasive distrust, and they're always suspicious of other people. They often interpret other people's actions as being demeaning or threatening. So think about that. They have that paranoia piece. They're very suspicious and distrustful. That is paranoid personality disorder. Schizoid personality disorder. This is marked by detachment from social relationships and a limited range of emotional expression. So when I think of schizoid, I always use the word oid at the end and add a V on it and say void. They're void of that emotional expression. They often prefer to do things alone. So I also think about them avoiding, not wanting to be around a lot of people. They kind of detach from these relationships. They don't really have a lot of emotion when they're expressing themselves, and they love to do things on their own. They prefer that. It's not because it's people don't want to be around them is they don't want to be around people. So that is a big way to differentiate the schizoid from the schizotypal. Schizotypal personality disorder exhibits eccentric behavior. They normally have some odd beliefs and they have difficulty in their social interaction. So it's not that they don't want to interact with people, they just have difficulty doing so. And because they're really odd and they have some eccentric behaviors, a lot of people may look at them and kind of go the other way. Another way of understanding schizotypal is often like a milder form of schizophrenia. So when you're actually going in the psychotic disorders in the DSM-5, if you go straight to psychotic disorders, when you start going through them, before they start hitting up the first psychotic disorder, you'll see schizotypal personality disorder with a little paragraph for you to read and understand to see if the client has that versus maybe some of the others. So definitely pay attention to that. And another tidbit that I want to share when it comes to schizotypal, maybe the typal part. So it's a type. It's a type of individual that's different and odd. So they don't engage well with other people because they have difficulty doing so. Versus schizotypal, they avoid it, that oid. They don't like to be around other people. And it's normally their choice. They just don't want to be around you. All right. So cluster A personalities, as I shared before, are categorized by what? Say it out loud so you can make sure you have retained it and remembered it. So we throw a trick question out, or I'm asking someone, hey, how do you know some cluster A personalities? You would look back at that person and say, these individuals are odd, eccentric, and suspicious. Odd, eccentric, and suspicious. Those are the characteristics of someone with cluster A personality disorders. Now, let's talk about some people. This is the fun part. This is the part I love. So these are famous TV characters. So for me, I do really well when I can visually see and feel and kind of connect with individuals that might be in that area. And I'm going to just give you some examples of individuals that actually have cluster A personality. So it's not definitive. So I don't want you guys to say, oh my gosh, she said that. I'm giving you examples of people who have certain characteristics, certain traits of individuals with these diagnoses. The first one, number one, paranoid. I don't know if you guys have seen, know the character Travis in the movie Taxi Driver. Anyway, it was played by Robert De Niro. I'm not too familiar with it, but I am a Robert De Niro fan. So the movie Taxi Driver, the character Travis was a good illustration of someone with paranoid personality type. They had a distrust and suspicion of others, believed that others were out to harm them. They misinterpreted all the social interactions as being threatened. It also says Travis became increasingly paranoid, believing that society is corrupt and that others were conspiring against him. And that caused him to act violently. So if you guys have not seen the movie Taxi Driver, just think about how that individual might have presented. And that is an example of paranoid personality type. Number two, schizotypal. So we all know Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Now, some of you folks are pretty young, so you might not know, but Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was a pretty good movie. And in this one, we're looking at Willy, one of the main characters, as schizotypal, as an example of somebody that has schizotypal personality disorder. He was odd, he had eccentric behavior, he had some suspiciousness and unusual perceptions of his experiences. Now, it says Willy Wonka's eccentric nature is reflected in everything from bizarre factory rules to his cryptic and paranoid behavior around the children visiting. He believed in strange things like an everlasting gobstopper and displayed suspiciousness towards his guests, showing some of those paranoid tendencies. So again, he wasn't strictly paranoid, but remember, individuals in that category, when that's why you do the clusters, cluster A, you have that suspiciousness, you have those paranoid behaviors. So it doesn't mean they have to be in that category. They can have some similar traits in other ones. So that's another reason why it's important to do clusters, because some of the symptoms overlap with the different personality types. Last but not least for cluster A is schizoid. Lisa Simpson. So I'm sure a lot of you know The Simpsons. If you didn't watch it back in the day, then you probably have seen a lot of stuff online or heard of it. But anyways, Lisa Simpson, who I believe was a sister on the show, was an example of schizoid. She was detached from social relationships. She preferred to do things on her own, and she had an emotional coldness and like a flat affect. So some examples of this is, while not an extreme depiction, Lisa often preferred solitude, intellectual pursuits, and had a difficult time connecting emotionally with her peers. So I don't want you to take that and run with it and say, oh my God, my child or my husband or my wife or my friend, they don't like being around people. They're the same way. I thought they were on the spectrum, but now they have schizoid. No, let's not label anyone. Let's not say they're on the spectrum or they have schizoid. This is just an example to see some of the behaviors that an individual with schizoid personality disorder might display. All right, let's move on to cluster B personality disorders. So, cluster B personality disorders. Let's start with the first one, antisocial personality disorder. These individuals have a disregard for others, they lack empathy, and they have a pattern of exploitative and manipulative behaviors. Borderline personality disorder, emotional instability, impulsive behavior, and a fear of abandonment. Histrionic personality disorder, excessive emotionality, attention seeking behavior, and a tendency to be overly dramatic. And narcissistic personality disorder, grandiose, a sense of self importance. They typically lack empathy and have a need for that constant admiration. So cluster B is probably one of the most common clusters when it comes to personality disorders. I'm sure all of you guys have diagnosed someone or know someone and like, oh, they're narcissists. Oh, she seems like she has some borderline traits, and they might be a little, histrionic. Whatever it is, we're very familiar typically with cluster B personality disorders. So I want you to understand that these category of personality disorders are categorized by dramatic, emotional, and erratic behavior. So it often causes a significant interpersonal social difficulties. These individuals normally have a hard time in society engaging and interacting with people and having healthy relationships. This is cluster B. So let's give some examples. Let's see who we got here. Oh, not just yet. We'll do it next. But some of the symptoms of cluster B, just a continuation of the first slide, is that impulsivity and the unstable emotions. So how that looks is maybe some mood swings, some trying to help difficult time regulating their emotions, things of that nature. So real quick, there are a few people that I want to help you see, maybe on TV or visually in your head, that portrays good examples of individuals with personality disorders and cluster B. So let's start with antisocial personality disorder, the Joker. He had a disregard for the law, lacked remorse, and he was impulsive. Another one, Frank Underwood. Oh, I love this show, The House of Cards. He was very manipulative, deceitful. He lacked remorse, a lack of disregard for others, and he was pretty impulsive. So if you're able to see the Joker, or you've heard of the Joker or seen little bits and pieces of it, or Frank Underwood in the show House of Cards, this will help give you a good reflection or understanding of individuals with this specific diagnosis. Narcissistic personality disorder, Jordan Belfort. So I don't know if you guys have seen The Wolf of Wall Street, but he was very grandiose, he was entitled, and he lacked empathy. Miranda Presley, The Devil Wears Prada. Very arrogant, had a need for admiration, grandiose, needed to be admired, that lack of empathy, and that sense of entitlement. So these are just examples. We're not saying these people had these personality disorders, but they gave a good depiction of some of the symptoms and characteristics that individuals have with these specific diagnoses. Borderline personality disorder, Suicide Squad, Harley Quinn. She was intense, she had unstable emotions, and she had those volatile relationships. We have Anakin Skywalker. I've heard of Skywalker. I haven't watched Star Wars, but fear of abandonment and impulsivity. They have Susanna from Girl Interrupted. So all of these individuals pretty much had emotional instability, a fear of abandonment. They were impulsive and they were unstable or had instability in their relationships. The last slide is histrionic personality disorders. I love Blanche from The Golden Girls. She was very dramatic, attention-seeking, and very flirtatious. And a lot of times I look at these individuals being highly sexual in their thinking and their thought process. So she was a really good example of someone with histrionic. All right, Regina George from Mean Girls. She had that excessive need for admiration and attention. So we don't want to get it confused and say, oh, she's a narcissist then. Remember, these are just examples of people with histrionic personality disorders, as you know, have that attention seeking and that need for approval and, need to be admired and so forth. So these are some examples of individuals with cluster B personality disorders. Hopefully it's helpful and you're able to just think about some of these people. I also, again, as I shared before in other videos, I have a lot of learning materials. So I do have a guide on personality disorders and some popular people that might not have been mentioned in this slide, just to help you remember it. It'll break it down like cluster A, cluster B, cluster C, just really simple. So let's move on to cluster C, the last one. Let's go with avoidant personality disorder. This is categorized by a pattern of social inhibition, feelings of inadequacy, and hypersensitivity to negative evaluation. So, an example, these people normally avoid social situations because they fear being rejected or criticized. So, they normally just avoid being around people in those environments that could cause that. Dependent personality disorders. This is categorized by pervasive and excessive need to be cared for, leading to submissiveness and clingy behavior. An example of this would be relying on others to make decisions, constantly needing that reassurance. And you see this sometimes in a lot of relationships and sometimes children with their parents. They're really, really dependent and they need that validation and that assurance. Again, it's on a higher scale than the average person that can be problematic in their everyday life. All right, and the last personality disorder that we're going to talk about today in our presentation, and also the last one in cluster C, is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. I love to tell people that yes, even though there's an orderliness that these individuals have, it is completely different than obsessive compulsive disorder. So OCD and OCPD, nothing to compare them with. They're like night and day. Individuals with OCPD, they have a preoccupation with orderliness, perfectionism, and control. They often have a significant distress or impairment when those things are not working out or going in their favor. For instance, they might spend an excessive amount of time on a task because they're trying to get it so precise and so perfect that they end up not doing well or succeeding because they've taken too much time focusing on getting it right when they could have just did their best and then moved it forward. Some of the common personality disorders for the theme of this is anxiety, avoidance, and difficulties with interpersonal relationships. So you want to kind of look at these individuals, and we're going to move forward and go over some of the famous people that have these, because this might help you understand it a little bit better. All right, Bridget Jones from Bridget Jones' Diary. She had difficulty making decisions without other people, so very dependent. The Big Bang Theory, Leonard, fear of being independent and doing things on their own. And Will Hunting and Good Will Hunting, emotional dependence on other people. Some of the key symptoms: excessive need for care, difficulty making decisions, and fear of abandonment. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder. We have Sheldon Cooper, The Big Bang Theory, preoccupation with order and rule. We have Brie Van de Kamp, that is from Desperate Housewives. She had that perfectionism and a need to be in control. These are some examples of OCPD behavior. And then Monica from Friends, an excessive concern with cleanliness and having everything in order. So it's not just the cleanliness piece, it's about having everything in a specific way. And again, that can be a little OCD. So I don't really think that's probably a good example, but I would definitely consider Sheldon Cooper and the Brie from Desperate Housewives as some of those examples of OCPD. So remember, they had that preoccupation with order, perfectionism, and one other thing is they have very rigid behavior. It has to be a certain way. And last but not least, antisocial personality. I thought we would end it off on a good note, something exciting. I know you guys have heard of the movie Frozen. It's like a childhood classic for a lot of people, children, and some of you might be old enough to have that been a classic. But one of the characters we're going to discuss and finish things off today with is Elsa. She isolated herself in her ice castle. She avoided contact with others because she feared the magical powers would hurt them. She experienced deep self-doubt and believed that revealing her true self would lead to rejection and harm. So she withdrew from relationships and she even distanced herself from her sister. So that is someone that has that personality disorder and is supposed to be avoidant. So I apologize. It says antisocial up there on the slide. I will try to correct that, but it is avoidant, not antisocial. So that is the typo. Charlie Brown from the Peanuts. Hypersensitivity to criticism, social inhibition, a feeling of inadequacy, and avoiding social interaction. So again, it's that avoiding piece. So it's dependent personality disorder, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, and avoidant personality disorder. I hope this video was helpful and you were able to get a lot from it. I am going to show a few case studies on the screen. I am going to read them out because I have been told some people just listen to these while they're driving, but I want you to just take it all in, listen to the case study, and then at the end, I will tell you what personality disorder it is. So this is the quiz time. John, a 35-year-old man, works at a nighttime security guard position, which allows him to avoid interaction with others. He lives alone, doesn't have any close friends, and rarely speaks to his family. John doesn't seem to care about his lack of relationships and prefers solitary activities such as reading science fiction books and playing video games. He avoids social events at work and has no interest in romantic relationships. So, if you're thinking John, or if you're driving, just remember John and tell me, what do you think he has? And then also you can just put John and write down what you believe he has on a sheet of paper. Pause the video and I'll give you time to answer. Case study number 2, Sarah. A 28-year-old woman has a history of intense and unstable relationships. She often idolizes new partners only to turn on them later when she feels they are abandoning her. She experiences extreme mood swings, shifting from feelings of love to anger and despair within a short period of time. Sarah has attempted self-harm during times of emotional distress and frequently expresses a deep fear of being alone or rejected. So we have John for number 1 and we have Sarah for number 2. Number 3, and this is the final one, Mark. Mark is a 30-year-old accountant who has struggled with social anxiety since childhood. He often avoids team meetings at work and declines invitations to after-work social gatherings because he's terrified of being judged or criticized. He feels inadequate compared to his colleagues and fears that they think negatively of him. Despite being good at his job, he avoids taking on new responsibilities or projects that might involve public speaking or presentations. All right, guys, I apologize. I did not have the answers at the end of the slide, but we will go back and we will do the answers. So for John, who is a 35-year-old man who works as a nightclub security guard, what did you guys think that his diagnosis was? And you are correct. Schizoid personality disorder. It gave it away. He said he avoids interaction with others. Not that they're pushing him away, he avoids them. All right, let's see Sarah. All these instability in her relationship dynamics, unstable relationships, like she goes from one extreme to the other, all that emotional distress. What are we thinking Sarah has? Correct. Borderline personality disorder. So that is in cluster what? Ha, you got it. Cluster B. And last but not least, we have Mark. Mark is that accountant. He struggles with that social anxiety. He's terrified of being judged and criticized. Even though he's good at his job, he often takes on new responsibilities or projects because he doesn't want to be involved, because he might have to be involved in some public speaking or some presentations. So the key terms here is he often avoids team meetings at work. He's terrified of being judged and criticized. So what is going on with Mark? Absolutely. Avoidant personality disorder. And that is in cluster C. You got it. Cluster C. So I hope this presentation has been as helpful to you and it brings you all the knowledge and joy as you practice and move towards your social work journey. Remember to comment, remember to subscribe, because I want to keep this coming for you guys and I just need to know that it's working. So be blessed and I'll talk to you in the next one.